Today, we're going to dive into a leadership principle so powerful, it managed to turn a community on the absolute brink of collapse into a global force. It's really a forgotten masterclass and how you forge unbreakable unity from total chaos, a blueprint for creating viral organizational energy. It's called the Zinzendorf Rule. The year is 1727. I want you to picture an estate in eastern Germany. It's a sanctuary called Herrnhut, which means the Lord's Watch. Its owner is a man named Count Nikolaus Ludwig von Zinzendorf. Now, he's a wealthy nobleman, for sure, but he's also a deeply committed pietist, someone who believes in a heartfelt personal faith, not just rigid church rules. And right now, he is watching his grand, compassionate experiment spiral into a complete disaster. You see, he had offered asylum to hundreds of Protestant refugees, the Moravians, who were fleeing persecution from all across Europe. He gave them land, he gave them homes, he gave them safety. But instead of peace, the community was just consumed by conflict. They were arguing relentlessly over these tiny points of theology, turning the very faith that should have united them into a weapon. This sanctuary was becoming a war zone, and the dream of Herrnhut was about to die. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll break down exactly how Zinzendorf turned this utter chaos into a global movement. We're going to look at the crisis, the man himself, the radical rule he came up with, the systems that powered it, and its frankly unprecedented results. And then we'll see what any of us can learn today about forging that kind of unbreakable unity. Okay, so let's dive right back into that moment of crisis. Because to really understand the solution Zinzendorf created, you have to feel the full weight of the problem he was staring down. What was actually happening, and why was it so incredibly dangerous?
I mean, on paper, this whole thing should have been a massive success story. You've got a noble host, a safe place to live, and people united by the shared trauma of being persecuted. But the reality? They were splintering. They argued over everything. The nature of salvation, the right way to do a baptism, the role of the Holy Spirit, and these were not polite debates, you know? These were bitter, personal, identity-level conflicts. The very thing that should have been their glue was actually the acid that was dissolving them. The community wasn't just failing, it was on the verge of eating itself alive.
And this slide right here shows the crucial turning point. Zinzendorf's first instinct, the logical one, right, was to try and force them to agree. I mean, he was a nobleman. He was used to getting people to find a middle ground. He tried to get them to sign some kind of doctrinal peace treaty. It was a complete, total failure. Every single debate just made the divides deeper because he was asking them to compromise on what they saw as fundamental truth. And that failure led to his big breakthrough. Unity isn't forged in agreement, it's forged in action. He realized he had to stop them from arguing about their faith and get them to start living it together in a way that was so demanding it made all their arguments feel small and irrelevant.
So who was the man behind this radical idea? I mean, this wasn't just some random thought that popped into his head. It was really the culmination of his entire life's journey, a path that took him from the highest echelons of privilege to a profound sense of purpose.
So Zinzendorf was born into the German aristocracy. He had it all, the wealth, the status, the castle, the whole thing. But from a young age, he was also a devout pietist, part of this movement that believed faith was this intimate personal experience, a religion of the heart, not just a bunch of rules. And this created a deep conflict inside him. His whole life, he saw this massive gap between what powerful religious people said they believed and how they actually lived. Then came the crisis at Herrnhut. All of a sudden, this abstract problem was blowing up in his own backyard, and the chaos forced him to find a real solution. And that's when he realized the only way to lead this community out of the fire was to walk through it himself.
And this right here is the heart of his transformation. His authority couldn't come from his title as a count. It couldn't come from his money. If he was going to ask these refugees to sacrifice their deeply held arguments for a bigger cause, he had to sacrifice something far, far greater first, the very privileges that defined who he was in the world. He had to earn the moral authority to lead, not just inherit it. He had to show them the way, not just point to it on a map. So this profound personal sacrifice, combined with his huge insight about action over argument, well, it all came together into a new philosophy, a whole new operating system for a community, and we call it the Zinzendorf Rule. Zinzendorf's new rule was brutally simple. What you do is the only real proof of what you believe. True faith wasn't something you debated in a quiet room. It was something you lived out together in the real world. He totally reframed belief as a systematic, non-negotiable commitment to action. It's like the community had been endlessly arguing over the textbook on how to swim. Zinzendorf basically threw the book away and told them the only way to prove they were swimmers was to jump in the water and start saving people together.
Now, to make this philosophy real, he didn't just suggest it, he engineered it. He built the entire structure of the community on 3 incredibly strong, totally non-negotiable pillars. These weren't just guidelines, they were the fundamental laws of Herrnhut. The first pillar was his direct answer to all the chaos, the brotherly agreement mandate. He literally had the entire community sign a document, a social contract, where they all agreed to systematically, intentionally, set aside their theological arguments. The point wasn't that the differences vanished. The point was they chose to make them irrelevant. What they had to agree on, no questions asked, was a unified commitment to serving a mission that was bigger than any of their individual opinions. It was a declaration, action over argument, mission over minutia. Now, the second pillar was just pure radical genius, the Sacrificial Immediacy Protocol. Zinzendorf knew that a shared mission couldn't be safe or comfortable. To truly unify people, it had to be compelling, dangerous, and demand everything they had. So he prioritized sending missionaries not to the easy places, but to the absolute hardest, most dangerous spots on Earth, to communities of enslaved people in the West Indies, to the Inuit in the frozen north of Greenland. And this wasn't some kind of death wish, it was a strategic masterpiece. Radical, visible sacrifice became the psychological fuel for the whole movement. Seeing your friends and family risk everything for the mission made all those petty fights back home seem completely insignificant. It just generated this powerful current of shared purpose.
And the third pillar? Well, that was the engine that kept the whole thing running, the 24/7 watch system. Zinzendorf set up a continuous, around-the-clock prayer watch for 100 years. 100 years, non-stop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a member of the community was praying. This was a masterpiece of organizational design. It created this constant, tangible sense that the mission was always moving forward, always alive. It was the community's heartbeat. It was a psychological power plant, ensuring they never lost momentum. It was a system for creating perpetual, viral energy. So a philosophy is one thing, but making it actually work, day in and day out, that requires concrete systems and habits. So how did Zinzendorf operationalize this radical devotion? How did he turn it into a self-sustaining engine? Well, first, he knew they could never be truly radical if they were dependent on somebody else's money. So he implemented the Economic Self-Sufficiency Protocol. It was a simple 3-step plan. Step 1, they built their own industries. They became master clockmakers, weavers, craftsmen. Step 2, all the profits from their communal work were used to fund their entire global mission. And step 3, this guaranteed their complete financial and structural autonomy. They didn't have to answer to anyone but their own mission. And this practical independence gave them the freedom to be incredibly audacious. But to power this engine, the leader needed immense moral authority. Zinzendorf couldn't ask for this level of extreme commitment from other people without embodying it himself in the most visible way possible. And that required a radical personal system. This system was called the Disappearance of Self. He systematically dismantled his entire aristocratic life. He and his wife renounced their titles, they moved out of their sprawling manor and into a simple home right there in the community, living just like everyone else. In the rigid, class-obsessed world of the 18th century, this was absolutely shocking. But it wasn't just a symbol, it was strategic. By visibly sacrificing his own status, his wealth, and his comfort, he earned the undeniable right to demand that same level of devotion from others. His leadership was no longer based on who his parents were, but on earned moral authority. Okay, so we've got this radical philosophy built on 3 pillars, powered by practical systems of economic independence and earned moral authority. So what was the result? What happened when they finally turned this engine on? To put it simply, the result was an explosion. The Zinzendorf Rule didn't just solve the crisis at Herrnhut, it transformed that small, fractured community into one of the most powerful and effective missionary forces the world had ever seen. It unleashed that viral organizational energy he had so carefully built. Now look at this. This is what's truly mind-bending, the sheer scale of their impact. This first bar represents all the missionaries sent out by every single Protestant church combined over 2 centuries. The second, much larger bar, represents the missionaries sent out by Zinzendorf's little community in just 28 years. Just let that sink in for a second. In less than 3 decades, this tiny group
born from chaos, launched more missionaries than the entire rest of the Protestant world had in the previous 200 years. This wasn't just success, it was a total paradigm shift. Zinzendorf's legacy is just immense. He proved beyond a doubt that systematic, shared action is a far more powerful tool for growth than forced agreement. He institutionalized a culture of radical discipline and an unwavering focus on the mission. And maybe most importantly, he showed that when people are willing to set aside their own egos for a collective purpose, they can create viral, world-changing movements. He literally wrote the playbook on how to turn shared sacrifice into unstoppable energy. Now, this is a fascinating piece of history, of course, but its real power is in its timeless lesson for any team, any company, any community today that is struggling with division. The story of Zinzendorf really forces us to ask a crucial question. In our own organizations, when we're faced with our own internal disagreements, our distractions, our turf wars, and our trivial disputes, how do we forge that same kind of unstoppable viral energy? The Zinzendorf Rule gives us a really clear blueprint. First, make a conscious, systematic decision to set aside trivial differences. Just stop arguing about things that don't actually move the mission forward. Second, focus all of that saved energy exclusively on a unified, actionable mission. Define what you do, not just what you say you believe. Third, unify your team not through memos or meetings, but through visible, shared, sacrificial action. And leaders have to go first, giving up their own privileges to earn that moral authority to lead. And finally, always remember this core truth. The real strength of your organization, the source of its energy and its resilience, is the depth of its shared devotion to that mission.
Nikolaus Zinzendorf built his world-changing movement on this profound truth, that unity is found in action, not in agreement. His Zinzendorf Rule provided a systematic blueprint to lead through radical devotion, through sacrificial service and communal discipline. And his relentless pursuit of a unified mission reveals an immutable law of leadership. Radical devotion is the key to viral organizational energy.